That's but you can do both. You can use Chat GPT and then go through and edit and do your writing. Yeah, that's what you should do. All right. Well, are we ready? We are. Okay. Let's get started. Hello, hello.
Testing, testing. Is it on?
We can hear you
Hello?
online.
Okay, thanks.
You can hear me? Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Okay. Call to order.
Call to order at 7:01. Chair Williams,
Here.
Commissioner Cornell,
Here.
Vice Chair Reese,
Present.
Commissioner Duggan, Commissioner Glasser. Here. Commissioner Herring.
Here.
Commissioner Dye,
Aye.
Trustee Sterling.
Here.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right,
For the record, Commissioner Pinson is not showing up tonight.
she is not.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to the approval of the minutes from April 24th. Has everyone had a chance to read them?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as written. Second?
Commissioner Cornell. Yes. Commissioner Glasser. Commissioner Herring. Oh, I guess you weren't here. Sorry. I'm sorry. Chair Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan. Commissioner or Vice Chair Reese,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye.
Yes.
But next time we'll take the extended version.
You got it.
Thank you.
I'm also in agreement.
Okay, do we have anyone in the public that wishes to speak on any item that is not on the agenda? Nobody here in person. Anyone online? Okay. We'll close that and we'll move on to our discussion items. We have two discussion items this evening. The first is the multimodal transportation plan.
Yeah.
Want to do a brief introduction of it?
Yeah, so I'll kind of go over this aim. We have Carly online to go over the presentation. Just a quick, the reminder, the multimodal transportation plan helps communities make decisions about the types of programs, policies, and projects to advance and fund in the future. They help local governments create equitable transportation systems that align with community goals and objectives in medium to long term. While transportation plans consider all modes of transportations, they have a particular focus on surface transportations, including walking, biking, transit, and motor vehicle travel. I realize there's an error in here, but Carly's just going to make some presentations on some initial draft recommendations and would like your feedback at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Britt. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Great. Sounds good. So I'm sharing my screen, so you should be able to see that as well. So thanks for the background. I'll jump into the presentation. I'll start with a brief project introduction, just reiterating some of what Britt said. And then really the goal of this meeting is to share our draft recommendations and get your feedback on those so we can hone those recommendations to develop a final plan and some implementation and roadmap of how to get these ideas on the ground. And then talking about next steps and answering any questions. So introduction, you all have seen this before, but the Transportation Master Plan is a long range plan. So providing a vision of how to reduce congestion, improve safety, and provide multimodal transportation options. So we'll share the guiding principles and vision that we've developed as a part of the kind of foundational elements and stages of the planning process. We then did a robust existing conditions analysis in order to see what's on the ground today, to understand where we want to improve and make upgrades and kind of address those specific points of congestion and safety concerns. So we're here today to present those recommendations, both projects, policies, and programs, and then we'll from here develop an implementation strategy and incorporate the feedback we've heard from you all, as well as other boards and the general public. And we're set to complete the plan in the fall. So I won't read all of the vision statement as it's a bit lengthy, but I've bolded some of the key words here, which, as we said in the goal of this plan in general, is to create a multimodal set of transportation options in Nederland traveling within Ned, as well as to Nederland from across the region, and making sure that it's safe, accessible, equitable for all modes to travel. And we really want to prioritize and emphasize sustainable modes of walking, biking, and transit. We want to make sure that these modes are reliable, and that as the transportation industry evolves and technology changes, that we're incorporating those into the future, and not just thinking about this snapshot in time, but thinking ahead to the future of transportation. The guiding principles get in a little bit more detail of how do we make this vision come to fruition. So kind of breaking down each mode and those goals of inclusivity, equitable, accessible, and those key points there. So jumping into draft recommendations. So those recommendations are focused on each of the modes. So biking, walking, driving, transit. And then we did a deep dive and analysis on parking, as well as more general program and policy recommendations. So starting with the roadway recommendations, 3 primary locations here that we're focused on based off community feedback and existing conditions analysis. So the first is the roundabout. The second is the kind of that jog in the road, both Ace Hardware and BNF kind of access points. So Lakeview Drive and the Bridge Street intersection. And then lastly, the intersection of Highway 72 and Eldora Road. So starting with the roundabout, the concerns of the roundabout, you all are familiar with, but safety concern, lack of intuitiveness for people driving, as well as people walking, crossing the legs of the roundabout. This is because the center island doesn't require deviation for vehicles. So we see pretty high speeds going through the roundabout, whereas generally the goal of a roundabout is both to provide that kind of access for multiple legs, but also to kind of slow speeds. There have been a number of crashes here. There haven't been many crashes in Nederland, but this is one of the hot spots throughout the town. And then lots of public comment. So not just the quantitative piece of high crashes, high speeds, but also the qualitative feedback that we got from the community. So solution, will show a CAD drawing of it on the next slide, but just to touch on those key points, it's to increase the footprint of that center island to slow speeds, so to create more deviation. So when you're driving, you can't go straight through, you have to go around this now proposed bigger island. Adding splitter islands, so you can see my maps. These refuges, so when you're crossing as a pedestrian, there's a place to cross while you wait for the next leg, like a gap in the next leg of traffic. And then signage. So the point about intuitiveness, providing signage for people crossing the street by foot, as well as vehicles traveling through the roundabout as to where to stop, where to yield, just making that more clear. And so that's through signage as well as paint. And then you'll see that in order to increase this footprint of the center island, we created 2 one-way segments. So 2nd Street becomes one-way westbound, and then just a really small segment, I think 30 feet of a one-way section on Bridge Street. It becomes 2-way north of the crossing here. But if we were to have 2-way on both of these streets, we would lose a lot of the kind of footprint area. So these one-way segments provide kind of this tighter increased deviation that I've been referring to. So the next intersection is Lakeview and Bridge Street. So here we've gotten a lot of comments about congestion as far as people queuing up to try to make a left turn out of Lakeview. And so we have added a left turn pocket here. So we're not delaying right turn traffic and through traffic because we've got a turn queue pocket for left turning vehicles coming from southbound left turning vehicles coming from Bridge Street onto Lakeview Drive. Similarly, we've created a left turn pocket coming from Lakeview onto Bridge Street, as well as a receiving left turn lane. And so this just allows smaller gaps in traffic on Bridge Street to be available. But people can make a left turn onto Bridge Street using smaller gaps in traffic because there's a receiving lane for them to merge into. So those solutions of the left turn pockets and the receiving lane address those concerns of queuing. We've done an analysis, a traffic modeling exercise to show we collected volumes during peak times. And when we put those volumes into the traffic model, we see that when we add these turn pockets that we provide a great way to address the congestion concern. And then the last intersection is Highway 72 and Eldora. So again, the concerns here are about queuing in large part, but we also heard concerns about speeding, especially it's kind of, this is off the cardinal direction. So we'll call it Highway 72 is westbound, right turning vehicles coming from Highway 72, turning onto Eldora Road, going really fast. So part of our solution tightens this northeast corner curb radii so that vehicles can't make as quick of a right turn. We've also added turn pockets here again. So a left turn pocket with a receiving lane, and then a left turn pocket with a receiving lane coming from Eldora Road, and then a left turn pocket on Highway 72 as well. So those extra turn lanes are summarized here. So this would require widening, obviously, of Highway 72, but at these two intersections, Lakeview as well as Eldora, a roundabout, the footprint of a roundabout is too large to reasonably do for a price or a cost that kind of is feasible. So adding these turn pockets does require widening, but is a lower price point than a roundabout would be, and provides a better solution. Roundabouts work better when you have an even volume coming from each of the legs, whereas in these cases we have a primary road and a secondary road. So adding these turn lanes is kind of the most appropriate solution. So some bicycle and pedestrian recommendations that that just address these kind of interactions with vehicles. So first is the existing crosswalk from the visitor center is obviously the with the highest volume of pedestrians. So when we collected volumes of pedestrians as well as vehicles, we saw that this met what's called the warrant from the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So when a location has a certain volume of vehicles and a certain volume of pedestrians, instead of just having a flashing yield sign, it is allowed to have a red light. So as when a pedestrian is present, they would push a button and a light would turn red for vehicles. They're required to stop, pedestrians cross, and then the light turns green for vehicles. So you've probably heard of the current proposed treatment as a rapid rectangular flashing beacon, where the pedestrian is present, they push a button, instead of the vehicles getting a red light, they get a flashing yellow light, which means they have to yield. So this is still the current proposed treatment to be put at that visitor center crosswalk. However, we did want to note that this meets the warrants for basically a signal. And this would address congestion better than that rapid rectangular flashing beacon, because now instead of every time a pedestrian is present, vehicles have to stop and you get this constant stream of pedestrian traffic. And so we're seeing a lot of kind of delay of vehicles. We would collect pedestrians, vehicles would stop, all of the pedestrians would cross, and then the vehicles would go again. So we're proposing kind of upgrading that rapid rectangular flashing beacon to that next device level, which is the pedestrian hybrid beacon or pedestrian signal. We did hear some ideas of, oh, sorry, yes.
So Carly, so would that be like what we see as a typical car traffic light, or could it be the pedestrian signal, but it turns red? Or you get what I'm asking?
Yeah, it would not be a traditional car traffic signal. It would look similar, but it would only turn red when a pedestrian is present. So I know this was a concern. We talked about converting the roundabout to a signal. Is at 2 a.m, am I gonna have to wait at a red light even when no one's there? The answer is no. In this case, you would only wait at a red light when a pedestrian is present. So it's called pedestrian actuated.
Miranda, is there no way that we can upgrade or at least petition for the Safer Main Streets to turn into this type of signal?
You'll lose that grant. If you try to amend that design, then you go back through the whole CDOT cycle of review and analysis,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no time.
Okay.
It's a good opportunity to collect data, implement the rapid rectangular flashing beacon, collect data, see how congestion and delay is impacted by it, since you already have the funding for it. And then you can help, better inform your decision of, do you want to upgrade to a pedestrian hybrid beacon from there? So it's
All right,
kind of a
thanks.
nice, like, natural experiment. And that's something at the end of the presentation I would love feedback on, kind of the community character piece and the implications to the character of the community if a pedestrian hybrid beacon was recommended in this plan. And then, sorry, we could talk about that now too.
Go ahead. Do it later. This is Commissioner Dye. Yeah, I'll save it for later. Thanks.
Yes, Commissioner Williams, is there an example we can see somewhere? Is like Boulder? Does Boulder have one of these?
Yes, Boulder has a lot of rapid rectangular flashing beacons, and a lot of those are being upgraded to pedestrian hybrid beacons. Some of you may have heard of the $27 million grant, $23 million grant that the city just won. A large portion of that grant is going to add more pedestrian hybrid beacons. There's one in the neighborhood I live in on Broadway, just north of the Alpine Balsam kind of ideal market neighborhood. I can send a pin location to Miranda or Britt to forward along to this group if that's helpful.
Yeah.
But that's one I can think of offhand for those who are familiar with Boulder.
I've seen the flashing yellow. I haven't seen the.
There are fewer of them. There's probably 4 or 5 I can think of offhand, and then there's another 5, I think, RFBs that will become PHBs through this grant that they just won.
I could probably take a
Yeah.
video and send it to you guys too.
Oh,
I know which one
Yeah,
she's talking
thank you.
about.
okay. Thanks.
This is Commissioner Reese. I'm curious, by changing that to a red light, would that be timed in such a way that we didn't end up? Because I certainly watch on Canyon where, how fast if there's a lot of people coming, right behind each other, you could really back up traffic there with those yellow signals. And I could see that being the same case where I heard you say, we'll collect the pedestrians. And is the idea that, okay, once it's turned right, there would be at least a minute or something to allow traffic to get through? I'm just curious how that would work.
Yes, I believe I can confirm, but that you can set the timing. So yes, it's pedestrian actuated, but there would be a delay for the pedestrian. So it wouldn't just be every time a pedestrian comes, it's going to turn red, but there would be a certain amount of time for vehicles to go through too. And that's a conversation of, do you want to prioritize pedestrians or vehicles? And who, we can measure the delay of what is an acceptable number of seconds of delay for someone crossing the street, and what's an acceptable delay for vehicles too, and set those standards based off of community values.
This is Commissioner Dye. I'm going to jump in anyway. I really don't like the idea of a red light in Nederland. I think that's very likely to be ignored. I think it will not do us a service as a planning commission or the board of trustees. I think that will really lose a lot of community trust in letting this move forward. I realize this is the first time you're getting feedback here, but it kind of turns my stomach.
From a safety perspective?
Just from I'm getting for it,
Yeah.
But if there are people crossing, how could
No,
you?
of course not.
No.
Yeah.
But that's the only time.
But if it's red
Yeah.
and there's no one there,
Yeah.
No, but I don't, well, help us understand this, Carly. It wouldn't
Yeah.
turn red if nobody was there, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It would only turn red if a pedestrian
Okay,
were to
yeah.
push the button.
so it senses
So it's-
someone is there?
So,
No,
yeah, so
yeah,
basically.
well, I think it could be a sensor, but the traditional one is where there's a push button for a pedestrian to push when they are present, and then a few second delay, and then the light turns red for the vehicles and green for the pedestrian crossing.
So the red light is only triggered when that button is pushed. Otherwise,
Exactly.
traffic is flowing. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But how long does it stay on?
That's
It
where she was
depends
saying,
on-
I think,
yeah.
that we can trigger it and adjust it.
Well, that's why I was
Yeah,
asking
so-
if there was a sensor that determines if there's someone in the crosswalk, then it stays red and then it goes off as soon as they're done.
It's probably timed.
It's a time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and because this is just a 2-lane road, it wouldn't be red for very long. When it's a 4-lane road or it has a median, it takes longer for a pedestrian to cross and the light's red for longer, but because this is such a short crossing, it wouldn't be red for very long.
But it's a red light in the way that if I ran a red traffic light, I would get
Exactly.
pulled over and I would get a ticket.
Exactly. Versus the
Whereas that-
RFB is a yield when pedestrians are
Yeah.
present. So if
Right.
a
So,
pedestrian's
right.
present and you run it, that's illegal, but it's otherwise acts as a yield.
Right, gotcha. Well, even that, I think, to Mike's point, I think is a big difference. Just in terms of the
Yeah.
pain in the butt factor.
Yeah.
Even though I think the end result really isn't any different or better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
I
the point is
agree.
you're still yielding
Yeah.
to pedestrians,
Right,
which is
yeah.
great. But you're not like, you don't have to keep sitting there while nobody's going by.
Yep,
for another
agreed.
30 seconds or whatever. But I don't know.
This might be getting too far into the weeds, but would this be like an overhead hanging light or something on the side of the road? Or is it too early to ask that question?
Yeah, we can look into if it could be on the side since it's a 2-lane road. It's traditionally overhead, but with such a narrow roadway that we're working with it, we can explore if we can do kind of side poles.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
I think red moves.
Yes.
Because folks were interested in an underpass, we just wanted to note the approximate cost of that, and thus are recommending either keeping the RFB or exploring the pedestrian hybrid beacon rather than an underpass, just due to the high cost. Another crossing that I wanted to note is the crossing near the park and ride and the library that also could be a pedestrian hybrid beacon, so similar to what we were talking about at the visitor center crossing. And then we've proposed 4 new crossings at further up north at the intersection of Navajo Trail and Peak to Peak Highway, as well as 2nd Street and Jefferson, and then 119 East, and then 119 and 3rd as you kind of come in from Boulder Canyon. So depending on the speeds and volumes of those locations, the device recommendation would differ, and we can explore what those would be in detail. So second bridge location. So there were 4 proposed locations done in the recommended in the previous study. We've eliminated location 3 and 4, and I think this was discussed as a part of the previous study too. But because of the grading, the right-of-way acquisition, and the costs associated with construction of 3 and 4, we've eliminated those 2. So that's kind of the further east and the further west location, and then are moving forward with location 1 and 2. However, are not recommending a specific location at this time just because of the development that is being proposed and being considered. Each of these locations has considerations that are going to be outlined in the transportation plan, as well as kind of the advantages and disadvantages of each. Some of it depends on whether this bridge provides access for vehicles all of the time or only in the case of emergencies. If access for vehicles is provided all of the time, traffic calming is going to be really important here so that we don't get cut through traffic on these bridges and then going through your downtown and your kind of what is intended to be a lower volume, lower speed street. So we really want to understand and create an experience for vehicles where you want to drive on 119 and it is more inconvenient and slower to drive on Lakeview and then over the bridge. So that's going to be an important part of the bridge. But kind of the first conversation is whether vehicles are allowed only in emergencies or all of the time. And so that's a conversation that we can have too, which we had during the phase 1 as well. So diving into the parking piece. So we collected data in the fall. So during very peak times. It was a farmer's market, it was fall festival, harvest festival, and a weekend of really nice weather day. So we see on the weekday, we did before businesses open in the lowest utilization time, 7 in the morning, we see a lot of open parking in the downtown area. When we look at these same locations on a Sunday afternoon, we see that every block is at capacity minus a couple of blocks. These blocks there's challenges just with intuitiveness and education of the public if parking is available here. So we're clearly seeing a parking problem on peak periods. So the recommendations to address that, we have short-term recommendations and then long-term recommendations, which focus a little bit more on supply. Before we increase parking supply by talking about a parking garage or additional parking lots with shuttles, ideas to explore are shared parking, which the town does have a few shared parking locations. I think there can be more shared parking locations, and higher and better use of those shared parking, increase education around shared parking, which is basically businesses that aren't being used during the parking lots not being used during certain times can be used by the general public. And then the big change is there is time restricted parking, increasing enforcement around time restricted parking, expanding time restricted parking, and then paid parking. So you can see in this pyramid, kind of the highest level of parking management is paid parking. And this is going to move the needle the most in helping manage the parking that you do have. And to be paired with all of these is neighborhood parking permits. We don't want to implement paid parking and more time restricted parking and then have people just go 1 or 2 blocks further out and reduce the parking supply for the neighbors. So a neighborhood parking permit is important to pair with this highest level of parking management. Increased enforcement is important for these prior bullets to be successful and to work. And then signage and wayfinding. So this is a really low cost way to improve the utilization of the parking you do have, is understanding for visitors of where is the parking, where is their availability, and then kind of how do you walk from where you parked to the farmer's market to where people want to go. So improving that experience for users can really reduce their perception of how far their walk is from where they parked to where they want to go. Curbside management, so just thinking about not just parking, but loading vehicles, commercial loading, as well as passenger loading. And then this education piece that we've been talking about as well. And then important in all of it is that you continue to collect data. So you can recreate this map every year during different times of year, times of day, to understand how these solutions have changed parking. And then if in 5 years you have implemented all these short-term recommendations, you're still seeing a parking problem, that is when kind of some of these higher cost solutions will come into play, improving transit access. So getting more people to take transit from Boulder, even from Denver, reducing the demand for parking. And then obviously you want to continue to collect data and monitor that data, but more parking supply. But before just building a parking garage, that's very high cost, changes the character of the community. We want to see if these short-term recommendations will move that needle and help improve the parking problem. So we're oh, sorry. Yes.
Hi, this is Mayor Pro Tem Sterling. When you were talking about additional data, just parking, how much it's utilized, how much it turns over, things like that.
Yeah, all that's great. So this is kind of the most basic is one snapshot in time. How many people are, or what percent of the spots on each block are being utilized? So 85% is our magic number, that anything above 85% is considered full. Because, you know, at the moment in time, if there's only 5 spaces and there's only 1 empty, that space could easily be full. So we really want to reduce that cruising for parking and have 1 available space on every block at any given time. So we want to see blocks in this orange space and the yellow space rather than any above 85%. It would also be great to see dwell time. So how long are people staying in the spot? This gives us a sense of these employees who are parking for a full day. Are they residents who are parking, you know, all of the time 24/7, or are they visitors? So in the blocks where you've got a lot of businesses and commercial, you're going to want higher turnover. And that's where the time restriction comes in, is you don't want employees parking all day. You want to have as many people as possible using this really valuable space in the core of your downtown. So it'd be great to, as you collect more data, to get dwell time as well.
Okay, thanks.
And then we just took a kind of preliminary identification recommendation of blocks where it would be great to see paid parking and keep that time restricted parking. And so in the core of your downtown area, and then, so that's the darker blue. And then the slightly lighter blue are places where maybe portions of the block should be paid and time restricted. And then the lighter blue is unrestricted, or maybe it's neighborhood parking permit. So this will be part of the recommendation, is specific locations where we recommend paid parking.
This is Commissioner Reese, I had a quick question. So where you have neighborhood parking permits, how do you deal with visitors? Like, so I've got a couple of people, I'm gonna have a barbecue. How does something like that work?
Yeah, so in Denver, they have, every household gets one visitor pass. You can decide if you want to give more than one visitor pass to each house and how you set that up. So it traditionally would be 2-hour parking unless you have a parking permit. That parking permit is registered for license plates of people who live in the house, and then, or a visitor pass that you can put in the dash.
So every resident that has a vehicle is allowed a parking permit?
Every resident, yes.
Okay.
And you can put
Okay.
restriction on the number of vehicles that are allowed to be associated with a household.
But other than that, like Jim's having a rager party and he's got a lot of people coming over, all those other folks would have to pay the parking fee.
Yes, and they would be subject to the time restriction as well.
Okay. We'll have to work through that one.
Okay.
Yeah, and the time restrictions, 2 or 3 hours, so I don't know how long your parties are. But
Oh, he throws ragers. We should be careful.
full day.
This is
Yeah,
Chair
and
Williams.
for that you can move your car one time. I lived in a parking restricted area in Denver, and we would just have people would move their car, set alarms, and then move their car one time.
This is Chair Williams. There have been a couple of other parking studies that we've done in the past. I think we even had a subcommittee that looked at parking. Have you looked at any of those results as part of your plan here?
Yep, we built off of those. If I recall, they were a bit older.
Well, not
So we-
that old, I don't think. A year? Okay.
Okay. I can refresh it. We looked at the DDA parking results, which I thought were a bit older.
No.
I have still all the presentation that I gave to the BOT several times. I'm happy to forward it, or maybe somebody from Town Hall can forward it to you. But we did have some recommendations. I mean, this is much more in depth, of course.
I was going to say, Jim, doesn't it sort of it includes like on Lakeview, like what you guys had recommended, right?
This does not show Lakeview. Yeah, but basically where we considered the paid parking, we had showed some places, yes, that along Lakeview Drive, you could expand unpaid parking and some other things like that
Yeah.
with some maps. But we could certainly get that to you so you can.
We did. It's the parking in Nederland plan that we sent you. I think
Okay.
we put it in the folder.
Okay.
Okay, that sounds great.
It was
Yeah,
like
sorry.
4 pages. Yeah, it had 4
I'll make sure
recommendations.
That's included in these. But yeah, if Miranda sent it to us, then we made sure to build off of that. So more in-depth recommendations for biking and walking. So just wanted to share some of the community engagement results when we asked people what's most important to them of where Nederland invests resources to improve walking and biking. And they said both crossings and sidewalks. So walking along roadways and across roadways and filling in those infrastructure gaps. We also had a location-based element to the survey. And so this is a heat map of where we saw the most comments. So not surprising, kind of in the core of downtown and at some of these key intersections, we saw the most people drop pins that they have challenges crossing the roadway. So the 4 locations that I shared in the previous slide of where we're proposing additional crossings are identified on this map here. And then here are just 2 locations where there's gaps in sidewalks, and there's others as well. like on Eldora Road. So we've got a map coming up where I'll show where we want to upgrade sidewalks. So crossing improvements, we talked about the upgrade from the RFB to the pedestrian hybrid beacon at the visitor center and the park and ride, and then those 4 new locations as well, filling in sidewalk gaps. And then the other one is changing the crosswalk treatment type, or the crosswalk treatment type. So right now it's the striped and a zebra ladder crossing. And you can see here an image in another very snowy community in Truckee, the kind of crosswalk that they use that lasts longer. So you can see when you kind of are walking around town, even in Google Maps Street View, the crosswalk gets faded very quickly just because of the elements and the heavy vehicle traffic. And so this is more durable and improves visibility throughout the year. So here's
So
another image of
okay,
that
yeah.
crossing.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's basically just a different material type. So rather than just keeping the asphalt and adding striping, it changes to pavers. There's different kinds. You can use concrete, brick pavers, and thinking about the maintenance implications and the cost, but generally having something that's not just the asphalt with the paint, and that's more durable. So here's a map of where we're showing additional sidewalks as well as formalizing current trails that are called, we call them desire lines or goat trails. You see them a lot in town or places that there is a trail, but it's not maintained. It's really created just by people walking at a certain place. So where we want to upgrade that to a more formal trail. The darker green are places where there are no trails today, where we're proposing additional trails. So most of that is kind of building out the recreation network kind of in this part of town. And then there are sidewalks that are not concrete, so they're not ADA accessible currently, where we recommend upgrading those kind of softer material paths to concrete sidewalks so they can be accessed by wheelchairs and by strollers and meet ADA requirements.
Quick question on some of the trails.
Yeah.
Looking at the map, a lot of that goes across private property.
Yeah, so that's a part of the recommendation is to coordinate with those property owners. We worked closely
Gotcha.
with Miranda and then Nikki, and so most of
Gotcha.
the
Okay.
trails, we try to
Great.
pick locations that aren't on private property, but that's one of the
Okay.
considerations.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then the other priority was thinking about bus stops. So obviously this location, Eldora Road, is key for school access and bus stops as well. So traffic calming measures. So this is slowing vehicle speeds to make it safer for people walking and biking. So thinking about how we redesign the roadway, shoulder striping, things that visually narrow the roadway help slow speeds. And then those crosswalks, so we can make sure that pedestrians, it's visible throughout the year where pedestrians are crossing the road, and then narrowing roadways and adding center medians. So this is kind of just general considerations to make so we can help slow speeds. And then if we go back to the roundabout, if you just think about the roundabout, there's the gas station and access points really close to the roundabout. So it's a recommendation to do an access control plan in the future in order to narrow driveways, reduce the number of access points, which reduce the number of conflicts where people driving are going to be potentially turning where there are people crossing. And pairing with these recommendations, it's important to consider those number of access points and reduce those conflict points. And then because there are concerns about speeding and there are, enforcement is present some of the time, but thinking about speed camera enforcement, that could be present 24/7. And then transit recommendations. So the results in the community survey, people want to see more transit service. That's obviously the number one. And they want to see information. When is the bus arriving, especially in the winter when it's cold out? That information is really helpful. And then extended hours, especially the NB, so later in the evening and earlier in the morning to help with the commute from Nederland to Boulder. And then more transit routes within Nederland. So we'll talk about what that local transit looks like, and then improvements to bus stops. So the current RTD kind of future vision for RTD doesn't include any changes to the NB or access to Nederland. So thinking outside of kind of the RTD box at this point. So we had a conversation with Eldora. They're interested in collaborating. So as far as the details of this collaboration, what it looks like, that is still progressing, but knowing that this is a really great potential partner who's interested in reducing, vehicle trips through NED to Eldora, and how can we think about a shuttle? An important part of that is going to be parking in Nederland for that shuttle access. So kind of fleshing out what that collaboration could look like and setting the stage for that moving forward in the future. And then an in-town shuttle, we had a lot of conversations and thought a lot about, would this make sense? Can we extend a regional route to have a Nederland kind of circulator as well? We think what makes the most sense is doing that just during event days. And so that could be within Nederland, or that can provide connections, increased connections from just the NB between Boulder and Nederland just during events. And then Boulder County is performing a transit study in the next year. So this will be a great opportunity for Nederland to be a stakeholder at the table, to be a part of future funding that Boulder County will be pursuing to provide increased access to Nederland throughout the county. And then a program that the county is doing is called the Mountain Driver Program. It's a volunteer driver program that the county is moving forward with. So just making sure that Nederland continues to educate, or will educate, its residents and visitors about this upcoming program that the county will be running. And then providing connections for transit users from that first last mile connection from their workplace or their home, such as through bike parking. And then I'll talk in detail about bus stop improvements. So you've got 9 bus stops, only 2 of them are ADA compliant. So recommendations to make all bus stops ADA compliant are that they have landing pads, signage, crosswalks, and sidewalks. And then a kind of extra bonus, where there is room and there is funding, is to have a bus pull out, bike parking, wayfinding, benches, a shelter, and information on the route, whether that be real time or static information. And then lastly, programs and policies. So maintenance, obviously there are very few resources, especially after a big storm of snow removal. So just thinking about your prioritization of which streets get snow removal first, and making sure that's in line with the vision and guiding principles from this plan. And then as well as in the summer, debris removal as well, street sweeping. And then wayfinding. So thinking about that, what the content is on the wayfinding signs, that it includes destinations as well as time to those destinations. And then clear instructions. We talked about this, especially in locations where you've got parking on the outskirts of town and everyone is coming from those kind of more satellite parking lots to destinations. And then traffic studies. So as you have large developments like the one that's being considered today, that it should be required that they perform a traffic study to look at the implications of the number of vehicles anticipated to be drawn to that site, and what the impact is on the surrounding street network, and how do they offset that kind of change in delay that development will incur. Education on roundabouts, that's part of the design that we have, is with signage, but it's important to educate users about the change to the roundabout that's being proposed, and then generally how to use a roundabout, and then pursuing additional funding. So all of this is great, but the town has limited funding. So what are some grants and external funding sources that can be pursued in order to implement these recommendations? Next steps. So would love kind of more feedback from Planning Commission. We also met with ProSAB. We're meeting with SAB. We'll be doing general communication or general outreach to the public in July and August. And so this phase 2 of engagement is going to be really important to stakeholders and the public in order to hone these recommendations. We're meeting with the task force tomorrow as well to present these draft recommendations and make adjustments. And then we'll prioritize recommendations, knowing that all of these can't happen at once. What recommendations should happen first as funding becomes available, and then how do you implement these? All of that will be compiled in the draft and then final report. So would love any questions, or I can go back to any slides, and this is a lot of information.
I have a question, Miranda. Where is the NDDA's wayfinding project?
They were waiting for our creative identity and branding, so they knew the color scheme. So we sent those to them, and now they're in design. That was kind of the last I had heard from them.
And it has sort of cross-reference with what's going on here in the multimodal plan? Okay.
Roger, you have a question?
Yeah, this is Cornell, yes. Whew. My 75-year-old brain had, I tried to keep up. I was just about to ask a question. You're already on to the next subject. It was really the comments that Jim was talking about too. It's the permits, neighborhood permits. I, yeah, I understand, all the pros and cons, I think. I just wanted to say that um, the parking issues, I'm sure, as we found out, where you found out, are several Sundays, and it certainly hit and miss the market, things like that. So you have hours of this demand. So somehow to make a plan to accommodate that, and the idea of actual community residential permits, again, I think is kind of the things that the other two mentioned with the red light. Um, it's something that I think needs to be put out there and, get some feedback and some neighborhood understanding, because it's certainly, not something that you would think of prime time for neighborhood, for Nederland, for sure. So, it's obvious that needs to happen. The other thought I had was the things like the Presbyterian Church. So how does church members, you have that street marked off as permits? Do you give every church member, anybody attending the church, a permit? How do you do that? So there are some issues to be talked about, worked on for the permits.
And you brought up a good point about the peaks on weekends, certain times of year, is you can have this permit exclude, or like you can make time restricted and paid parking only during certain times of year. So you can have it and certain days of the week. So you can have it just be in effect on Saturday and Sunday. So during the week, or maybe it's during the shoulder season, anyone can park for free for any amount of time.
Yeah, this is
Thank you.
Chair Williams. One of the issues we've had, that you're probably aware of, is people parking in town and then taking the bus up to Eldora. So they end up parking all day and taking up valuable spaces that could be used for businesses. So, I mean, part of the solution is timed parking, or maybe even paid parking, but,
And
Do you-
enforcement.
well, obviously enforcement. But how do other communities deal with a problem like this? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, the time restricted parking is usually the tool that's used to address that kind of parking pattern that we're seeing. I think also in the conversation with Eldora, we acknowledge that if there's going to be a shuttle, especially, that we need to address the increase of parking demand that would be associated with kind of encouraging people to park in Ned and shuttle up to Eldora. So having designated parking for that specific use. So a shuttle would really kind of help facilitate rather than folks taking kind of, yeah. So I think shuttle paired with parking, and then the time restricted parking to discourage parking in other locations apart from this designated kind of Eldora parking area.
Okay. Jim?
This is Commissioner Reese. I think that's some really good stuff. I think that people are a little taken aback because they know how it'll be received by a lot of people in the community where, like you said, we don't even have paved sidewalks in a lot of places, and suddenly we start regulating parking. But the future is here. It's coming, and we got to roll with the times. I really would love to see some more. I love the idea of the shared parking with shuttles, especially during things like the ski weekends and farmers market, and would love to see how that could be accomplished. I'm not sure how, or if it's possible to look at things like the elementary school parking, the high school, different, I know we already do that at our church parking lot on every day, but Sunday. But some areas where there's lots of spaces that would be a lot of bang for your buck to have a shuttle to take people Eldora, so they're not tying up the business parking. They're tying up a spot over at the elementary school that's not being used because it's Saturday, so that kind of stuff. So I like a lot of the areas you're at. I think that there's going to be quite a bit of pushback from the community, but almost everything we're trying to do, we're getting pushback on. So what's new?
Be great if they would
Linda?
just park in Boulder and then take the shuttle from there, since that's what the bus goes straight to Eldora.
Yeah. Well, it's-
This is Commissioner Glasser. I have a question with the upgrades on the bus stops. And is there any consideration for any type of trash receptacle? Because it seems like things are just thrown right where they get on the bus. Has that been addressed at all?
That's a great point. I think adding trash to this list would be a great addition. Thank you.
Could I ask a quick question too? This is Elizabeth. I'm remote and I came late, so my apologies. Thank you for the presentation. When
you-
I,
I'm sorry, we haven't opened up for public. Oh, she's on I'm sorry.
Oh, hey,
Elizabeth is on.
Yeah,
Elizabeth.
when did you join, just so I can make record?
7:24.
Thank you.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Past your
well,
bedtime.
welcome.
I know it is. I'm working on it. Thank you for welcoming me, and I won't take up much time, but I did walk in or join the meeting right when it was being discussed, something about trails running through private property, and I wondered if we could just circle back and hear that one more time.
Yeah, and Nikki and Miranda would know better, but I know these recommendations considered private property, and so I don't know if any of them do go through private property.
I'm looking at the Sunnyside neighborhood, that one little loop above the community center,
Okay, and that one
and
does.
it does look to me like the trail. Let me just see a second if I can, and what was being said for this slide? Is this basically like new trail suggestions?
So it's a few things we're showing here. We're showing new sidewalks. We're showing sidewalks where the material type is as being recommended to be more ADA accessible. We're showing the formalization of current trails that are informal today. And then lastly, we're also showing new trails.
So
And these are high level lines. So I might have gotten the line, we might have gotten the line work a little bit off. So we can bring in the parcel layer to make sure that we're correctly showing the alignments.
the one I'm seeing through Sunnyside neighborhood does look to cut through private property, and it's hash marked green lines. I don't know what that indicates.
Dark greenish, yeah,
Dark-
both greens are new trails.
New trails.
Yeah, dark green are new trails, and then light green are places where there are informal trails today that we're proposing formalizing.
And those, you're saying when all is said and done, will not go through private property, or they may?
I can work with Nikki. There might have been one that was impossible to avoid private property where we would need to collaborate with that property owner. But we tried to avoid private property at the alignment of all other trails.
Okay, so the one I'm looking at looks like you would turn on Navajo, make a right on 6th, and you would cut through what would appear to be 83, 87, and I don't know what number, but 3 properties on that one little corner of Sunnyside.
Okay. Yeah, we can bring in those GIS files and kind of work on the alignment and address those private property overlaps where possible. There might be a case where collaborating with private property or seeing if there's an opportunity to collaborate to make that trail connection would be required, in which case there's obviously when it's a high level recommendation that would require further study and further conversation.
This is Roger Cornell. So the one up Stinky Gulch does cross private property at the top of it. I think it's an issue to be worked out, but just for the record,
Oh,
the
yeah.
proposed formal trail, the dotted green, is private property.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments before I open it up? I don't know if we have any public on, but well,
Yeah, this is Commissioner Dye.
Okay.
Had a couple of thoughts. Give me just a second to get back to the right area. I was looking at the roundabout map, which I think it's great that some improvements are made there. But I wanted to point out a couple of little things. So the pedestrian crossing on the south side as well as the west side, the safety islands, I forget the term that you had used, but both of those would impact delivery truck drivers to make deliveries to the gas stations, just so you're aware. And the turning East Second Street into an one-way street would also probably impact negatively some of the businesses down on East Second Street. Not that it shouldn't be done anyway, perhaps, but just for your consideration. On a different note, I was curious if we have data on how many pedestrian-related accidents have occurred in Nederland at various locations.
We do. It's in the existing conditions, which on the plan website, in
Gotcha, okay.
Engage, off of Engage Net, there's a map of all of the crashes, and then we call out bicycle and pedestrian related crashes specifically, and there are less than 5. I want to say there are 3 in the last 5 years that have been
gotcha.
reported.
Okay, of course. It's hard to measure something that's not reported. My last, it's not so much a question as a comment, but looking at having a speed traffic camera, I would be very wary of putting that out into the community. This is just my personal opinion, but I doubt that there is much palette for that here. Thank you for all your work on this.
Yeah, thank you.
Chair Williams, so I had a quick question going back to the intersections. So when you looked at and designed these additional lanes, like the turning lanes and the pockets, did you do any measurements to see if any of these would fit? Or is it just conceptual at this point?
Yeah, so there's like a spectrum of conceptual, it's like percent design. So we have done measurements to see if things will fit. However, more detailed design I'd call this 10%, 20% design. It will need to go to 100% design, but these queue pockets do fit. I mean, with roadway widening.
Okay. Well, I just didn't know whether we had enough space to do roadway widening in some of these intersections, particularly
So part of
Go ahead.
Part of 100% design would be thinking, what are the grading implications, costs, environmental impact? So a lot more detail that would need to be pursued and investigated. So these are a little bit more costly given the need to widen the roadway, but with grading, it could be done.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Glasser, and I have a question on in the roundabout, coming from Boulder Canyon Drive. How would you turn back onto North Bridge Street going north?
It wouldn't.
If it's one way, you have to get back on Bridge Street.
That's the same issues as they brought up on Second Street.
So Carly, I think that the access point would be on 3rd Street behind the gas station, because it's only one way from the gas station, the realtor building.
So it'd be turned the
to-
other way.
Exactly.
Okay.
So then you'd have to kind of swing around.
That's either.
And my guess is that you'd have to come down to First Street and go down to Salto and turn to get onto Second Street, since this becomes one way here.
So both of them, you have to go around the block.
Yes, yeah.
And this would include signage.
Gas station.
And these are all great considerations, and making sure that there's signage so people understand how to kind of navigate the roadway network with these one-ways.
Okay. Anyone else? Comments, questions? Do we have anyone out in the public? I'll open it up for public comment. Is there anyone there, Britt, to your knowledge?
I just have a small comment. This is Peter Kasich, Public Engagement Manager for town. Going back to the permit, the parking permit thing, there are ways we can kind of work around those, like was mentioned, like permitting only during peak times, or if someone is planning to do something large, we could probably work out a way to do like a parking variance for an address or something for a time.
That's a great point, Peter. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
Carly, you had mentioned that the crash data was on the Engage Nederland Multimodal Transportation Plan site, but I'm not seeing it. Maybe Peter, you know where it is? Maybe it's
So
not
it's in
labeled.
It should be in the document section on the right-hand side.
I see 3 documents. It says Nederland MTP, State of the Community, Community
Yeah,
Engagement Summary.
It's in State of the Community, sorry. It's not its own document. So in State of the Community, which is the existing conditions, there's a safety, a crash section.
Okay, got it.
It
Thank
should be
you.
in there.
Okay. Any other comments?
This is Commissioner Reese. I just wondered, you talked about the underpass ideas being cost prohibitive. I wonder if that's a reasonable recommendation if we're talking about $5 to $10 million for an underpass.
So we are not recommending that due to the cost.
Okay.
I just wanted to share that because it was a request made was to consider it.
I would be very curious if you had any cost estimates on what the bridge would cost.
The
Hopefully
second
under
bridge.
three- Hopefully
Yeah.
under 3.5 million, because that's what we applied for.
Well, if an underpass is 5 to 10 million, I got to guess it's going to be significantly more than that for the second bridge. But if we see you again here in the future, if you guys could give us any rough data on that, that would be great.
Real quick though, Miranda, was there a cost estimate associated with the second bridge? That's why we landed on the 3.5 from.
Correct.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was from JVA.
Correct.
Yes.
There was an opinion of probable cost from JVA.
Yeah, so that's and that was and we budgeted for the highest amount, which was a two-way traffic.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's with vehicle
Yep.
traffic.
Yep.
Okay.
Vehicle
And
traffic.
3.5 million?
3.5 million. So we just again applied for congressional spending dollars for that. So we'll see. We'll see if we get it.
Guess it's less to go over than under.
Way more, yeah, I guess so. We don't-
Okay. Any other comments, questions? I think you got some good feedback, Carly. Appreciate a
Yes,
very
thank you
nice
very much.
presentation. And so next steps then, will you come back before the planning commission later this summer? Is that?
Miranda, do you recall if there's another?
I
next
don't,
touch
I
point
believe it's
commission?
one, the way the scope of work is it was actually one per board. And so if you're interested, come watch the discussions before the Board of Trustees.
Okay. Just wanted to be clear on that, so. All right. Well, thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Can I have one more question?
Oh, one more question.
Yeah.
Bye, Carly, and welcome back.
Hold on, Carly, before you go.
Yeah.
What is the raw data that you took this was a question that had come up last night during the BOT meeting with our Boulder County Sheriff's Office partners. I see the roll-ups. I don't see the raw data in terms of numbers of crashes. Can you just disclose the data source that you took these from?
Yes, CDOT data, CDOT crash data.
It's CDOT data? Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay. Again, thank you very much. And we'll move on to the destination blueprint presentation. I assume, is Peter going to make that or are you going to do it? Right. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's me. I'd be doing that. So let me go ahead and share my screen really fast. Alrighty. Sorry, it's taking a second to load. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Hopefully it's showing the right one. All right. Too many windows open. All right, so I'm going to talk to you about the where we're at with our Destination Blueprint program today, and specifically the draft of our tourism management strategy that I've been working on with Beth Wright from the Colorado Tourism Office, and get your feedback and thought as it is right now. Yeah. So for those that aren't aware, or just need a refresher, Destination Blueprint is a program that we applied to the Colorado Tourism Office last year. And it's a continuation of the Reimagination Destination program that we received the year prior. So in this program, we received a full destination assessment, including just what kind of visitors we're seeing coming through town, what time of year, where they're going, where they're coming from, that kind of thing. A full day workshop that focused on kind of the future of tourism in town and what the community to see from that. And then 100 hours of free consulting from Beth that is what we have been working on, or what I've been using to create this management strategy. So I'm not going to go through the whole strategy because it is very long. There should be a copy in the agenda. So I'm just really going to touch on some key things that are relevant for the Planning Commission. Basically, we created this draft as a two-person team, and we are going to each board and commission for their kind of focused feedback, and then we are going to take that to make some big revisions before doing a round of public engagement, and then finally going back to the board of trustees for final adoption, hopefully in late July, early August. So I just want to kind of point out, first of all, this is not a plan to bring more tourism to town. This is a plan to manage the tourism we are already seeing, and just create a roadmap that we can follow to basically have more responsible tourism in town and the surrounding areas. So we don't see as many issues as were kind of brought up in the last presentation via traffic, parking, things like that. Basically, we have the tourism already. How can we better utilize our current resources to help that, like use that to help the town, and also just mitigate what impacts that will have. So this has a 2-year strategy. And then as we were looking at all of the tasks we wanted to accomplish, it became very apparent that this needed to stretch out into a 3-year plan. So that is what we are looking at. This will also look not just in town, but also at the surrounding. One of the things that came up during that workshop, someone mentioned that Nederland is a town within a national park or a national forest. So it is important for us to not just think about our town boundaries, but the people that are outside of that will also be affected. First and foremost, we wanted to make sure that this was going to fit in with every other plan that we were currently working on, starting from Vision 2030, which we were working on in 2021 to the new comp plan, the transportation plan that you just heard about. I just heard that the DDA isn't doing this updated plan. I forgot to take that off the slide. So yeah, whatever the updates to the Prost will be, and working with like the state and county plans as well. One of the big things was starting with Envision 2030, as we already had a lot of that work done, and we realized that the vision statements that came out of that were tied, or that had something that tourism affected. So the beginning part of our plan touches on every vision statement and its tourism impact counterpart. And some of these are a bit more robust than others. Obviously, things like art and culture or parks and recreation are going to have a more direct impact, but it does affect our economic development, how we engage our community as we grow, and even housing and human services. So we want to make sure that we are looking at every single angle when it comes to managing tourism in town. The goals of this strategy are to make sure that we are communicating with the community, with businesses, with other stakeholders in the area, make sure that we are educating and managing visitors in a way that is beneficial for town, that doesn't destroy our, what's the word I'm looking for? Doesn't change Nederland, basically. We also want to make sure that we are promoting our businesses and the things that are happening around here. One of the big things that came out was sometimes people will drive through town and not even know that we have a business district, that East First Street has all these businesses, or the Caribou Shopping Center is right there. And we also want to make sure that we are just improving the overall tourism experience, both for the visitor and the community, and that includes things like looking at, those parking strategies and making sure that, people's direct neighborhoods aren't being completely impacted by, peak tourism season. We also want to make sure that we are doing proper research and monitoring of our tourism so we can create an even better and improved plan after those 3 years. Yeah. So for the PC, I'm going to talk about some of the strategies and goals that we came up with that are most relevant. So we broke this out into 6 major goals, and these are rather like high-minded things, like engage community businesses as stakeholders. I actually think they are just the ones that I put on this slide. Yeah, so these are, okay, I did not put that together until right now. Wow. Yeah, these are our 6 major goals. Each one has like 3 to 4 different strategies that we'll be approaching over the next 3 years. And each one of those is broken out into different actions, what partners we'll be looking at for those strategies, and what KPIs we'll be tracking for it. I'm not going to go into all of that specifically today, but I do urge, if you have not looked through the draft plan, to do so, because it goes into more detail. So for the PC, we've identified 5 of our strategies over 3 goals that are going to be pretty relevant, that we want your feedback on. So these include our first goal, which is, sorry, I have too many things open. That is engage the community and business stakeholders. So 2 of our strategies from there are establish clear communication procedures and strategies to effectively share information and engage with tourism and community stakeholders, and provide consistent update on tourism strategy progress, and build local awareness and engagement around tourism management and marketing efforts. Basically, these are ways to just kind of keep people informed on what is happening and where we are at in this whole process as we go through this 3-year plan. Goal number 4, strategy 2. So goal 4 is that is improving the visitor and community experience. So strategy 2 is collaborate on projects to improve and protect cultural and social assets to the community. So one thing that we just need to keep in mind is that tourism is going to affect the overall town itself, and looking at ways that we can just keep Nederland as it is. You know, people come up here to see the town as it is, to experience our culture. And this goal really focuses on, or really hones in just on how we want to make sure that the culture doesn't change to cater to the tourism. Goal 5 is kind of the big one for the Planning Commission, because it, I think, has the most direct impact on what you do at your meetings. And goal 5 is research, impact monitoring, and reporting. So this is really going to look at how tourism is impacting things like short-term rentals, or the just growth, new buildings, expansion, things like that. So strategy 2 is on monitoring short-term rental options, the economic impact and feasibility of additional lodging options in the future. Since right now we really only have one non-short-term rental lodging option within town boundaries. So that is something that is going to play a major part in the near future. And then strategy 3 is establish an impact monitoring system to collect data, analyze, and report on the impacts of tourism in Nederland and the surrounding areas. And this, I think, is important for the PC, as it's really going to help give you more data to look at when you have to look at various zoning, or like the different requests that come your way. This will just be an extra data point that will help you make more informed decisions. So that being said, I would like to basically hear your feedback on what you want to see Nederland doing with tourism, and how that could support the community through this 3-year plan. What do you think of the actions that I highlighted for your consideration? And also, yeah, just what other things you want to see, or like, was there anything that I missed, anything that needs to be added or changed completely? Yeah. So I will open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Peter. I can see why you went to 3 years. This is a very ambitious endeavor, and
Yeah.
lots of detail involved. So, okay, would anyone like to have a question or comment? Wow.
Wow.
Comment, I can comment. It's Roger. Hi, Peter. Well, I think an awful lot of it is because we've had both presentations, obviously the parking study and what we do with parking, I think, is a huge part of the tourism plan. So to make easy access and to have them work together is just a huge part of the overall plan and the day-to-day things that would happen on a weekend in Netherlands. So, I mean, I think that's very obvious, but that's obviously a huge part of working together on that.
Yeah, definitely. I am not a parking expert. I'm not a traffic expert. So it's kind of it's very beneficial that we have these happening at the same time, so we can kind of utilize the efforts that Carly's team is already doing to inform this plan as well.
This is Commissioner Reese. This is some pretty high level stuff. Can you just tell us what our tourism strategy is?
Kind of. It is very, I guess if I wanted to break it down into like a single just action, it is to have tourism have a more viable economic impact on the town without changing the town. Um, to keep people from just either driving through or parking here and going to Eldora or going on a hike outside of town. To utilize the traffic that we see to better the community.
This is Chair Williams. Could you give us maybe a little bit more detail on how you plan to implement, particularly the communication part? I mean, are we talking signage? Are we talking social media or maybe all of the above, web? How do we get this information to the tourists?
Yes, the answer to that is kind of all the above. So part of the overall goal is to have our little visitor center turn into kind of an autonomous department that would run itself, that would really focus on these efforts to get that information out to people. And I've already started working on that a little bit by splitting up our social media into two distinct areas, but this would also include having a dedicated website, having a budget that is just the visitor centers that's probably coming from something tourism related. In a lot of cities that is a lodging tax, but it would probably be something different here. Just so it's a more, it can run full time without just being something that is kind of a part-time thing for a lot of people. So yeah, and that would be the most, it would be just dedicated to getting this information out. Signage, yes, that is something that when we do this presentation for the DDA, we're going to talk about that and their wayfinding project and how we can kind of just incorporate the two together because they are already so far along on that. Just see what areas we can kind of help with and get on top of that. And then using our local resources as well. We have our own paper. We have just our Chamber of Commerce that is starting up along the Peak to Peak to get them involved and work alongside of them. And also reaching out to the other agencies outside of us, you know, making those connections with Boulder County, with the, you know, state tourism office, the different information channels that happen outside of the Peak to Peak itself. So when people do come up here, they already are informed on how to, you know, responsibly tour or visit our town and area.
Okay, one last question. So like a lot of communities, you mentioned Chamber of Commerce. I mean, a lot of communities have a Chamber of Commerce that does a lot of this work. Can you tell us what the role of the DDA might be in all of this?
So right now it is just to kind of to take the burden that of things that they want to do in the future, but may not be able to. I would love to see at some point the visitor center being completely under the DDA's guidance and just working as kind of a subset of them. That would be probably my ultimate goal of this whole project, to be able to take this wherever it is in the future and just hand it off to the DEA and just have it continue to run smoothly. For right now, it's a lot of connecting with the local businesses in the area to make sure that they are that they have a voice in this whole discussion, and making sure that we can get this in a plan to work for them as well.
Okay, Nicole, you had a question?
Yeah. Hey, Peter, it's Nicole.
Hey.
So when the BOT back in January approved for us to go after the $10,000 grant to create a dedicated Visit Nederland website, did we get approved for
Yes.
that?
So we were going to apply, and then our contact from the CTO suggested we hold off because the grant we were looking at was actually not a good fit. It would basically just cover the materials that would go on the website, not the website itself. So it seemed kind of a moot point. We are looking at there's a separate grant. It's a Miranda, did you remember what that's called? Is it a market or a
It's a tourism
tourism
marketing
match?
grant that was a more
Yes.
appropriate, and that opens up in July.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll probably come back to the board to request that in the future.
Okay, great. And then, my next set of stuff is just kind of feedback. I was definitely looking at this, not just from the perspective of hearing as the planning commission, but then also eventually as the board of trustees. We've had different philosophical debates about this in the past of what does the messaging sound like? I've always been more partial to let's create a great space for locals and the tourist stuff will shake itself out. But if we really focus first on infrastructure and everything for locals, like that's just been something that I've been super passionate about. But there's language in there that says benefits visitors and residents alike. Okay, I can kind of get around, I can see that and understand it. But then there's language throughout your document that says, create compelling travel experiences. And it kind of goes counter to when you say we're here just to manage the folks who are already here. It kind of sounds like
Right.
that it's creating new things to attract new people. And this is something that we've battled a lot just over the last couple of years of no, it's about management. And so like there's a lot of language in the document that sort of goes counter to the phrase that we're just trying to manage the tourism.
And that is why I won this feedback, because in my brain that was just like, oh, we'll create something that great for the community and that will also be compelling. But I totally see where you're coming from. So do you suggest striking that completely or just rewording that to be more community focused?
I mean, I know what I would prefer. I'd prefer a plan, a strategy, very specific strategy that I've brought up that kind of also pairs with parking or, some of these other initiatives that would play a support role. But that really work on getting sidewalks because, some of the initial funding that we had looked at, this with a tourism message or tourism plan was, oh, wait, could we go after tourism type dollars to get sidewalk funding? That would be cool.
Right. Okay.
Right. And so like I struggle with this. I really do. Because it's hard to say, yeah, we're going to go put a strategy and an initiative and put dollars behind tourism when our residents and citizens are still screaming for the parking spaces, the roads, the infrastructure, those types of things.
Right.
And so, in my mind, what is, Nicole's best case scenario is that it's a plan that is supportive of local needs, that sort of cross and feeds in and supports some of these other initiatives that we have going on that ultimately is about making a great local space.
Mhm.
And so, some of this, just other feedback is that I would just cater or hop onto what Jim's comment was that this is just not specific enough. It's kind of comes across as the brainstorm rather than like, this is a specific goal that we're going to hit. For instance, establish, or no, excuse me. Let me find. I'll have to find one of the specifics. But it didn't say like, this is what we want to do by when. And I'm referring to the
Right.
actual document, the actual document that you would put into the packet. Again, it just didn't come across as like an actual with enough specificity to say, yep, that's a goal. That's something I can see by when, and I feel good getting behind. I'll also note that 6-2, establish a tourism management advisory board. Didn't we just deny that?
You asked us to bring it back. You said
Yeah.
you didn't want to fund it right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't like say never pursue this ever again.
No, okay, but so that, because that was written in part of the strategy, the overall strategy. And so,
Right. So I think the feedback given to us at the time in which we brought it forward was like, this doesn't feel like the appropriate priority at this time. And so I think that's why, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's why it's captured here is we weren't really told no. And so for us, it's now just kind of waiting in the wings. And so, of course, if the board feels otherwise, that this isn't something worth pursuing, I wouldn't say we got that feedback.
so to that point, and I'm glad you brought that up, I don't know what the priority is when I look at all of these. I see 6 general things, a lot to do, not sure that we'll do all of them well, and I don't know what the priority is. Overall feedback, take it with some, love, and know that it's for the best interests of
Oh, yeah,
everyone.
totally. Yeah.
But just
Yes.
just overall feedback, and I'd love for folks to counter and argue with me about it.
No, I totally agree that we need to hash out these timelines to be more specific for just for this draft, because it was just the two of us working on it. That's why we just put the like, would this be a year 1 goal, a year 2 goal, a year 3 goal? But just as we develop this after we get everyone's feedback, I do hope to really block those out into a more prioritized state instead of just like what year we hope to get to this.
Yeah, but even with a year, like just the goals that are listed, it's very high level. And you know what, and like to do my due diligence, I will pull on some of that specific language, maybe even before we're done here, just so I can provide you with a few examples.
Sure.
This is Commissioner Reese. I have to agree with that. I would feel like this would be a great plan for Estes Park, but we're still trying to figure out parking and sidewalks and trails. I mean, some of the goals for tourism management might be goal 1, provide enough parking for tourism at high peak levels. Some of the stuff, I think when we get to this level of complexity, it kind of makes your eyes roll back in your head and say, well, I don't really see how this, I mean, I'm not trying to criticize you. There's obviously a lot of work went into this, but, bringing that back to more basic strategies of what we were talking about in our earlier meeting in particular, how do we, provide parking, trails, signage to direct people where they need to go, I think probably is our first step. If we're going to do crawl, walk, run, this seems like this is the interstate as opposed to we're kind of, trying to get the basics out of the way on how we can manage our current amount of people. And certainly I think there would probably be pushback if we presented something to the community that said, and this is how we're going to draw more visitors in until we could figure out how we're going to actually, my thing on tourism management strategies, how can we accommodate the amount of people that are already coming? But I don't know. I don't know if that's the same goal as you got from the BOT or not, but that's my feedback.
Steve?
Yeah,
Yeah, go
that
ahead,
is
Raj.
that is our ultimate goal. So if you see things like that, the one that Nicole just mentioned about, where was it? Maybe explore development of new attractions, experiences. Maybe that just needs to be struck completely because it doesn't align with that improve for the community, right?
Right.
Yes, and this is a Commissioner Diet, and at the same time, I know there is community demand for, say, another music festival to replace NetFest. So it,
Mhm.
I think this can be distilled into something that is beneficial for the community, as well as, helping to manage our existing tourism problem.
Right.
I did, so I was struck by the establish an impact monitoring system to collect data. I'm a data nerd, so I found that very interesting. I'm not quite sure what that would look like, but that also made me think of kind of a process that you might go through here in trying to distill this down into something that's more simplistic.
Mhm.
And that strategy or meta strategy is to ask the question of, like, are these goals and strategies measurable? And so, and if so, what would that measurement be? Uh, so that's a good question. Like, not everything is measurable. Not everything worth doing is measurable, but I think in this case, it might be a good guideline to help you figure out and to simplify this.
To turn them into smart,
Yes.
a smart goal.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Going back to your point, Commissioner Dye, a music festival that pulls back onto our history and our shared identity and our culture, that for me is something for the locals.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah. And so it's just, again, I can't get it out of my head, this
Yeah.
mentality of let's just build a tourism strategy that's built for locals first.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
how else to say.
I agree with that, and as what you said, if we can approve, I think it's okay to use an example. My favorite restaurant, and there's a lot of reasons and issues for it, but I won't even mention the restaurant. I'll just say I enjoy Thai food. But, and that there are issues there, but it was even exasperated tonight. But so what Nicole, you just said was, if you would actually make a space that was actually good for the locals, then you don't have to worry about tourism. But I mean, yeah, look what's happened to that place in the last year. I mean, it was fenced off. I took some friends down there the other night. To get it to access, you actually have to jump the curb and go up into the parking lot. So it's things like that. Another favorite one has a nice buffet on Friday night. And our good old Jefferson Street has been just a mess. I mean, you're taking your car into danger zone to go down the street, Meg. And I realize there's a project coming, but Karen Garrity, when I complained about it, said, well, we got a storm project coming. 5 years ago. So just the idea that if we would make it good for locals, that'll be great for tourism.
I like that. I'm gonna put that note into this document. I think that's a
And
great way to just kind of, when we do the provision of this, go through with that mindset.
And then just to piggyback off what other Commissioner Diet said about establishing an impact monitoring system to collect data, that was actually one of the ones I pulled as well. It's like, what does that mean? Like how? There's 100 different ways, interpretations of what that could be. And so my recommendation, Peter, is that, I mean, I would be happy with just one thing from each of these 6. or, maybe it doesn't have to be all 6, but one thing that we can say that we're going to do really good. And again, if it's focused on the locals and we can say we're going to nail that one thing in each one of these buckets, I would feel really great about that, because I'm concerned that, yes, I understand the reasoning for going for like a 3-year plan and to try to spread it out and to show like this will build on here or whatnot. But even that's confusing. I'm not sure that year one things are necessary up front. One of the ones that I saw was the conduct research on funding options was a year 3. And for me, if we could find funding options that were tourism related, but we could build sidewalks with them, it's like, why wouldn't we do that up front? Kind of a thing. And so again, I just can't reemphasize like simplicity. Let's do a few things really well and have it focus on the locals. I'm done.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions?
I think that the presentation prior to yours opened our eyes to a lot of the problems that we're facing right now.
Mhm.
And so to focus on tourism ahead of the problems that we need to deal with is making us think twice about what we need to do for the people that are here right now. And I have to agree with what Nicole said. We have to focus on the locals, and then tourists will come regardless.
Yep. So, Peter, this is Chair Williams. So this is kind of a general question, but before you started all this, did you look at how other communities are doing tourism? Not large like an Estes Park, but maybe a Lions or something like that, where, do they go through a process like this, or how do they kind of handle their tourism strategy?
Yeah, actually, we looked at a few different communities of our same size. I can't remember them off the top of my head because they are saved in emails right now. But yeah, actually, they are very much. Uh, this is kind of a hybrid of what we saw from those. Just pulling out the pieces that we liked, as far as approaches. Not so much the actual like goals or strategies, but just in how we want to like lay all of this out. For public consumption. So the tying it to our different strategies, listing out those uh, high like end goals, and the different strategies on how to achieve that. That's where that all came from. Was looking at these other town management strategies.
And did you have any feedback on how all that worked for other communities?
Um, Not like it's kind of ongoing, so not really. But I can definitely look into that and ask Beth to research that.
Because I'm
Previous
sure other
week,
communities have the same problems that we do with
Mhm.
infrastructure that they have to deal with. And I don't know whether they rolled that into part of this strategy or not.
Right. I want to say that we did see one that was like its primary focus was on local infrastructure. I'll go back and review that one.
Yeah, I think that's worth pursuing or
Mhm.
checking into, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And this is, oh, go ahead.
Or even tourism dollars focused on trail rehabilitation or something, right? It's
Mhm.
again, it's like a focused initiative on
The
local.
dollars come back to the community.
Right. It's a focused initiative on local needs and wants. And again, tourists will come regardless, just because of where we are. So that's another, maybe it's not infrastructure, but dollars focused on on trail rehabilitation. We just had a presentation on connected trail system. Could go towards something like that.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Reese again. Yeah, encourage you. I'm guessing you probably weren't on for the previous presentation, but.
I was.
Oh, were you? Okay. So a lot of the
Yes.
things we talked about in there, I think are very directly related to some of the goals we'd like to see. Is, you know, a lot of the stuff is again, maybe down the line, but parking management, shuttle systems, to get people. I will tell you the low hanging fruit, the best thing I saw in there that I think could probably be accomplished in a year is the things to do in Nederland website. That would be great. And you could kind of, you know, focus on some of that, but boy, some of these other things, you know, and how they would relate, you know, again, you know, here's places to park and, you know, it ties in. Part of the goal might be, you know, we're going to figure out a shuttle to, you know, the Hesse Trail and different places and things that relate to, you know, more concrete things that, you know, as Nicole said, really benefit us as a community, all the locals, and then make it easier for tourists to also come and enjoy the community too. But a lot of these things, at least to me, and I think it's kind of a theme we're hearing, aren't very relatable to the challenges that we have right now. You know, if we already had the sidewalks and the signage and the trail network and the parking, a lot of these things could be, I think, something we would focus on. And again, this is just my opinion, you know, it could be that maybe you're hearing this from the business community or something, that we need to try and figure out ways to drum up business. But, you know, we've got to do the blocking and tackling first, you know, before we figure out, you know, how to do this higher level stuff, in my opinion. You know, I'd just love to see some more concrete tasks and try to do less. Because here's the other thing, a plan that is not really attainable is not a good plan. It feels like a lot of work effort that you are doing, you know, and staff are doing and other people are doing. And if we look at this and the first thing is as I read through this doesn't seem like something we're going to get done in 3 years. I'm sorry to say, but it just doesn't seem like a lot of these things are attainable when we have so many other outstanding lower level tasks. And but boy, I would love to see the things to do in Nederland website done. And I think that's something that is an achievable goal.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
sure.
definitely.
Yeah.
I totally get that too. That is
And-
very good feedback, because I think you're right that a lot of this, or definitely some of it, is not even a 3-year goal, might be a 5 to 10-year goal.
And I think this was mentioned earlier, but having some type of priority on what you're going to do first and how you're going to build on that for the next goal and so forth might help us kind of put this in perspective, and also get an idea of how much effort and time it's going to take.
Right.
Any other?
One last thing, also good idea about the visitor center. I think that's a really great resource for visitors. I think that's probably the key place where people get information now. And if you could get the DDA to take that on and to expand that, and that would be a godsend. And I'm 100% behind you.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? I think you got some good feedback,
I
Peter.
got some great feedback. Thank you.
And hopefully you get good feedback from the other boards too.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. And I know you put a lot of hard work into this. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank
Peter.
you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And thanks for taking this on. It takes a lot of courage to make a first attempt at this. And it shows, I mean, I know you put a lot of work into it, and it's fantastic brainstorming. It's a step in the right direction. Just need to distill it.
Yep. Yeah, and that's why we're doing this, right?
Okay.
So, thank you.
All right. Have a good evening.
You as well.
Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to turn it over to Miranda. Your swan song. You want to do it real fast? No? Okay.
All right. Yeah, I mean, the report's in the packet. I was just doing a quick kind of scan through of what I wanted to highlight. You know, of course, I wrote a little letter of sorts to you all, you know, to the community, to the board of trustees, to the staff. There's times that I've heard like, oh, we haven't gotten anything done. And, you know, I have to say as a staff member who's been here for just shy of 5 years, it's a little bit like, well, wait a minute, like that's not entirely accurate. So it felt really important to me to take a moment and highlight what we have done over the last 5 years. And if you had a chance to look, there's some serious major accomplishments that I've listed here. So just want to give shout out, kudos to staff. You know, I joined right before COVID and navigated through that and kind of to where we are today. And the things we've done with you, I highlight that in my letter too, of all the code changes, you know, and just some of the land use stuff we've navigated. So really felt like it was important to maybe change that narrative a little bit and just remind people that while it may not always come across as major infrastructure like full road replacements, there is a lot that happens behind the scenes and continues to move us forward. Otherwise, you know, just kind of general updates from the staff. You know, I think it's been a tough month for them. You know, I resigned 7 weeks ago and it feels like yesterday. And I think, you know, during the 7 weeks, really figuring out kind of who does what and they're just kind of trying to survive and navigate that. And I think you see that a little bit in their reports. A lot of what I do is really being offloaded onto Britt. And so, you know, Britt and I, of course, work really closely together. And so she's the natural person to kind of absorb everything we tag teamed. And so the difference now is that Britt and I won't be tag teaming anymore. It will be Britt carrying forward on her own. But I think, you know, Britt is incredibly talented. She's got a drive and a passion that was really, I saw from kind of day one. And that's why I convinced her to go for this role. She is incredible. She's an amazing asset to you. I know she's going to do a tremendous job. I also know she will, you know, the new town administrator will, of course, support her, I think, in all the ways I have, but definitely talented hands and everything with Britt. She'll keep it going and moving forward. So thank you, Britt, for taking on all of this stuff. I didn't get a chance, sorry, I've been working on kind of a, you know, just all these transitions. So I didn't get a chance to do the what's coming before the board. So I wanted to just do a quick verbal update with what's coming before the board. So June 4th is the next board meeting. All of the boards and commissions have their annual appointments, except for the planning commission. Apparently you didn't have any terms expiring this year. So all the other boards and commissions did. So we'll have appointments to that. Currently Peter is slotted to do his tourism management plan, but perhaps that might change based on tonight's feedback. We'll find out. The interstate parking contract for paid parking is set to come before the Board of Trustees to vote on, to talk through the kind of the parking plan. So that is moving forward. Short-term rental ordinance. I think if you watch the Board of Trustees, you all had offered a recommendation. You liked option 1. The board felt that they resonated more with option 2. And just a reminder, option 2 was still a cap, but it pulled out Class C, which is CBD, general commercial industrial, and ADUs. And then they're also interested in a no cap for basically just bedrooms in a home and none of your whole home rentals. So Macy and Attorney Madsen are working on a revised ordinance based on kind of an alteration of option 2.
And can I just add something to
Please.
that? We're still open to all ideas, like even your guys' recommendation, and then we're just curious about this other. So like, I understand that could have probably looked like we were just completely ignoring what you had suggested, but we're just trying to look at all angles too. So apologize for that.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem Sterling.
Is that the previous board or the current board?
That was this one.
Okay.
The other thing though, from a continuation on the boards, the decisions that have already been made is the housing needs assessment, affordable housing yard and bulk ordinance. If you recall, you allow up to a 50% variance if there's a D restriction, and that D restriction was set for 20 years. Mayor Billy and Trustee Corvalon are interested in looking at increasing that 20-year mark. And so that's tentatively set to discuss on the 4th. And the last thing is that 19 Wolf Tongue is the burnt down home land. Unfortunately, the way our code is written is if that structure was not basically permitted and demolished within 6 months, you cannot construct it in its non-conforming use, which is what it is. It's a non-conforming use because housing isn't allowed in industrial. So this is maybe a trigger for your industrial conversation. And so Jesse Sievers is interested in purchasing the property with a third party, and he wants to build housing, but he can't even rebuild what's there. And so he's interested, of course, in multifamily. And so he's coming forward to basically ask kind of for a couple of things. It's a couple of different tracks. It's either like give a variance to kind of this burnt down building code and allow him to tear down and just rebuild a single structure, even though it's a non-conforming use. Amend the use group table to allow multifamily housing in industrial zones. I think those are really the two options he's most interested in. And so Britt will bring forward to the board, like, how do you want to handle this situation and get some guidance from them on, either way, I think they're coming back to you to take a look at maybe one of these sections, both of these sections, to see what you can do. Some urgency there too, because the fire department views this as a hazard. They think people are squatting in it, but even like no one is interested in paying the cost to demolish without an ability to rebuild. And that's really the weird situation that we find ourselves in because of code. That's also fair. I mean, it's just that it's a hazard. And so there may be, so there's just, we have to talk about like what are the opportunities here? So that's set to come on the 4th. On June 18th, the hope is that you're approving the new town administrator's employment agreement. Currently there are negotiations going on there, so that's the plan. We do quarterly grant updates, so Nikki will provide an update on the grants. I believe I sent you a copy of the PowerPoint that I had done, so it will just be an update of that. The short-term rental ordinance will hopefully get voted on because the moratorium was only extended until August 4th. So they really have to vote on that. Industrial pre-treatment is an ordinance we've been kind of working on off and on for a while, which is requiring businesses to do grease interceptors and treating their industrial waste so that impact doesn't hit our wastewater facility. Metropolitan football funds, the town received some Metro football funds, and we want to talk with the board on how to distribute those to organizations that support youth. And then the board did put aside $25,000 in ARPA funds to support nonprofits. So we want to talk about how they want to distribute those funds. So that's what's coming before you. Obviously, Nikki is interim town administrator. She's going to lead the charge on a lot of these things, but that's what is set for June. Questions?
Okay, well, thank you. And I'd like to start off by congratulating you on your new adventures. Like I said in my email to you, it's bittersweet. We love to see you flower, but we hate to see you go. So I just want to say I've worked closely with you the last 5 years and really enjoyed it and appreciate everything that you've done for Nederland, even though it doesn't look like it may have happened. It's all behind the scenes.
Things happen. No, thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I have to say it's, everyone knows this about me, but this is my hometown and I am so honored to be able to come back and serve my hometown in this capacity. It's been an incredible opportunity to be able to start here and we'll never take that for granted. And it's really bitter for me too. And when people ask me why, it's really about my career growth and where I kind of go from here, but nothing will ever take away from starting as the clerk for Nederland and being able to kind of take off from there. So thank you.
When did you start as clerk?
August 2019.
Yes, come back and visit. Yeah, right.
For
Yeah.
welcoming the new members as well and helping guide and transition us into the mix.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Excellent. All right, anything else? Okay, other business? Oh, yes. Roger, did you have something? Nope, okay. What's that?
That's something about me. I didn't know, I thought you were asking for the close, but other than
No, I was just asking if there's any other business.
I thought you're the chair. I'm sorry.
I
thought you were
was,
the lead.
I was opening it up for
Okay.
you to,
My term at the BZA is up here 1st of June. And, it's alternate, so you're just filling in. But the way things have kind of been happening, you end up, participating quite a bit. So to cut to the chase, I would do it, but I felt that this is something that's a planning commission appointment alternate. If there's anybody else that feels like they want to do it, or, this is the time that we should do this change and switch over. Otherwise, I will apply and go ahead with it, but I at least feel like, give anybody else an opportunity.
Well.
Okay, I'll sit down and write another
I
letter.
think we're lucky to have you represent us.
Copy and paste from the last one.
Well, no problem. I thought, I know I was gonna give Miranda kudos, but actually, she ought to be giving me kudos for giving her training in how to deal with a
Oh,
difficult member
I
of the
do
community.
thank you, Roger.
Thank you and good luck.
And this is Jim Reese. I also want to thank you very much. And I want to tell you that your joy and demeanor and the way that you, somebody suggested that I should apply for the town manager job because have so many strong opinions. I said, I don't think I would last 3 months before I got upset and lost my temper. So the fact that you deal with the contentiousness of this job and the stress, which I know personally how stressful it is from somebody I know who used to have this job. So I just want to thank you for always bringing a positive attitude to things and never getting your hair on fire about anything. And it has provided a great example for the rest of us. And I aspire to be more calm also. So good luck in your new community. I wish you nothing but success and positive community members coming. I'm sure there won't be any complaints at all.
yeah, you won't have any negative people there,
Very nice, thanks.
right?
Nobody cares loudly in Camp Verde, right?
Their Facebook is really nice. I'm like, what's going on?
No way.
Like really nice to each other, and they like bake bread for one another. And I'm like, what is wrong? What's going on?
We'll write some public
It's,
comment.
yeah, it's really
Yeah.
nice. I guess I'm not in the right group yet.
Yeah, you're not.
Okay, if there isn't anything else, let's, our favorite, part of the meeting.
Motion to
Thank you,
adjourn?
for having us as your last meeting,
Yes.
the last board meeting, yes.
Tec-
It's very
technically,
special.
I picked this date on purpose so I could do every single board and commission before I
Yeah.
go.
And of course, you don't have to say which is your favorite.
That's
Yes, she
We
does.
know what it is.
Yes, she does.
Yeah,
This one.
this one
Okay.
holds a special place in my heart for sure.
All right,
motion to adjourn.
okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 9:02.
All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Good night.